And welcome again to this webinar hosted by Forbes Middle East in partnership with GBM Oman. Today, we're discussing the transformative power of automation in banking. As we all know, companies across the world are embracing now new technologies to move a step closer to this digital transformation that we are all witnessing across all sectors. With the adoption of technologies like the robotic process automation, otherwise known as RPA, artificial intelligence, cloud, big data. We're here again to discuss how businesses, how banks can optimize on these tools to give their customers a better experience, a faster experience, and of course, to be able to compete in this very challenging environment that we are all seeing. We have a group of very experienced guests today. I'm going to briefly introduce all of them, and then we dive into the main points of today's discussion. I welcome Codeine Karaja, who's the Head of Customer Experience at Bank Muscat, Ewan McLeod, Chief Transformation Officer, Sohar International, Asma Zajali, Head of Group Banking Operations, Oman Arab Bank, Adi Aboud, welcome again, CEO of GBM, and Saikat Poder, who's the Associate Partner, Cognitive Process Transformation at IBM. I'm going to start with you, Codeine, just to put you on the spot, just kidding. Because you are with Bank Muscat, you're at the forefront of this transformation. You've adopted a lot of solutions in this digital age. Becoming more client-centric has been obviously a top priority for you. How could automation help banks in general in this endeavor?
Thank you so much, Jesse. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be part of this roundtable. As you mentioned, it's indeed a very challenging environment for all of us. And the question is quite intriguing because I would start, first of all, to point out that automation is helping equally customers and employees to be more engaged. For us, it's been a journey to actually understand, first of all, what are the new behaviors that customers are actually showing these days, especially in the last 1.5 years. Speed and reliability, it's something that everybody is looking for. People are not having patience like before. Equally, employees during the new working conditions are actually facing challenges. The collaboration is not happening like before. So automation simplifies by the very upfront purpose, but it needs to be driven by purpose and prioritization, and actually finding the right things to automate is not as a simple exercise as it might look like. Fundamentally, we are looking to identify, for example, those very time-consuming tasks for our employees that are demotivating them. There are plenty of tasks. We are very large organizations. The processes are very complex. And we are looking to identify time-consuming things that are not delivering value to customers. But automation, it's not the let's say the end goal here. The end goal here, it's first to simplify something, to make more sense for our staff, but also to deliver a better value for our customers. So yes.
Yeah, the customer is at the center, at the heart of this digital transformation. Let me take that piece to you, and you've been again at the forefront also of this transformation. I'd love to hear from you. If we all agree that RPA is now the way to go, what would you advise banks? How are they supposed to prepare themselves for RPA solutions?
Well, so okay, awesome, and I loved Codeine's start there by really taking the outside in approach, I think from a customer standpoint is super important. What are we trying to achieve? So the RPA, the automation, that's the tool. That's the tool. We want it to be quick, seamless, easy, no paper. But what are we trying to achieve? So what I think it's helpful for banks to do is take a step back and think of where are the pain points. And this is, I think, what Codine was pointing out. What's really annoying the customer? Is this necessary? And then, of course, I love your point about what's frustrating the employees as well. But if you start with the customer, I think that's the way. Begin with the customer. Say, what do we want them to experience? So, as an example, one of the things we've been doing is making sure that when you walk into a branch for a loan, you sit down with a customer services advisor, and you know that interaction, that human interaction. Very important. But we've had a customer saying, where's the paper? And we've been saying, no, that's it. And they said, yes, but where's the where's the paper? Where's the paper?
Wait, some customers want to stay on paper and do the
well, see, this is it, and this I think was Codine's point here, right? It's because you're what we're doing is challenging ourselves to say, look, does anyone want to walk into a branch and then say, and be given lots of paper, right? Even when I go to a Mantel, for example, they print me out a piece of paper, and I think, all right, thank you, right? Why? Email it to me, text it to me, right? Yeah. So I think we've got to make sure we're thinking about the customer first, then the technology comes. Right, then the technology, then the process automation comes. That's where. So, for example, what we've done is to delight the customer in branch. We said, well, look, how do we remove all paper? How do we ensure that this is straight through? So straight through processing, right? So there is no human intervention, right? Once we, apart from the customer relations executive saying, okay, it's 5,000 riyals. Okay, thank you. Right now, look, there's you may have to sign electronically, right? Or there may be a PKI approval on your phone, but at that point, the money's transferred into your account, right? So that the customer walks out going, so it's happened. Yes. Now that's the power of this stuff. That's the power of this technology, is really making sure that you're delighting the customer, meeting, ideally exceeding, but meeting their expectations. And then I love the point about making sure that you're removing as many boring and annoying processes, because boring and annoying equals an opportunity to fail, to create errors and so on. So what we've been able to do is to say, right, okay, all of those individuals that were doing this thing and we're doing the stamping and the so and so and the what's it and so on, and passing this piece of paper to him and passing it to her. They can all be retrained now, and we're retraining our colleagues to say, okay, here's something else you can do. So really exciting.
I mean, Ewan, I'm just waiting for the day when, if we don't need paper and we don't need human interaction, where we can do everything without even having to step foot in the branch itself.
Now you're talking. You're talking.
I'd like to add, if I'm allowed, a bit of salt and pepper here.
Yes,
because no matter what, no matter how technology is advancing and a lot of people are embracing it, there are still categories of people. We call them in our jargon personas, that they are still associating banking with a building. This right. Equals trust. Okay. Yes. They are still in a need to actually have a physical interaction, to sign a paper, to see a stamp. Yeah. If we are still considering these customers, because no matter what, we are looking to serve everyone in its own preferred way, we must be creative enough to design different journeys for the same purpose, and giving that particular flavor of each persona's preference in order to make sure that everybody is comfortable and they get what they are looking for.
Yes, clearly there should be options for those who prefer maybe more traditional ways. If we're talking about today's generation, I assure you they probably don't want the old ways. So of course there should be options for every sector of the customers. If I go to Asma, please, Asma Zajali, you've been obviously in the banking sector for more than 20 years. You've worked in foreign international banks. You've amassed a very serious experience when it comes to what customers want. Now, when we talk about automation and the different needs of different customers, how do you think it will allow banks and organizations to scale business processes and quickly respond to the challenging environment we're discussing?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity and the question. And maybe I'll just go on adding some things which my colleagues here mentioned before. The most important thing is having the customer journeys there. Every customer has different needs. And I think the pandemic sort of helped the banks in moving into that digital area and the digital zone, especially in Oman, specifically in Oman. And the world is moving towards having banks without any physical existence.
Yes.
So, we are getting there. Now, just to give a bit of basics, how all this started. We are, into a decade of social and digital revolution. So today, automation is no more a buzzword. It's an old word. People have moved on to digitalization and more, buzzwords there. But if we look into the basics of automation, it is simply to increase efficiency and improve customer experience. So customer experience is at the heart of it all, right? It is to automate the boring processes internally, but ultimately towards the end of that internal process, there is an output, there is a customer touch point, there is something which customer will feel. And automation, of course, helps us in doing that. In fact, at Oman Arab Bank, some of our strategic pillars are excellent customer experience and innovation, and they go hand in hand. So a few things one needs to ensure before starting up the automation journey is, it is not about reducing people. It is about allocating people to the right places. It is about upscaling them in the areas of need. It may be sales, it may be talking to customers, it may be many other things than sitting down and doing repetitive processes, which can be easily gotten into, robots or any other solutions we have and done seamlessly with no human intervention. It is not about cost reduction. That's the buzzword. Let's do automation and slash our prices, the costs by 50%. No, it doesn't happen that way. It is about cost optimization. The cost may still be there, but I'll use it for better things, for better innovative products, for better future, innovation. Automation helps really a lot in reduction in human errors. That's obvious because you're moving into straight through processes. It also helps in better collaboration. So you don't have to be dependent on talking to someone somewhere and know what does my stakeholder want. And everyone has a different story. And then we get into a whole different, OPSI jargon of SOPs, the standing operating procedures, the DTPs, the desktop procedures, and so on and on. You don't have to do all that and depend on people's memories when you're automating stuff. So this also helps institutions in having more accountability. There's clear accountability. There's transparency. There is transparency from a customer's expectation side, internally, the SLAs and the turnaround times. And it also, the most important thing, it also enables accurate data recording. And data is a buzzword. Everyone wants data. While everyone sits on maybe legacy systems of 30 plus years, especially the older banks.
Data is the new
and I'm sure, exactly, I'm sure Bank Muscat will know what I'm saying than Bank Sahar.
I don't know what you're saying, Asma. I have no idea. Legacy. No, we're...
So automation helps in data recording too. And one last message I would say that, having project management ways similar to agile, ultimately organizations need to move agile. And when you're doing automation through that agile methodology, then you really have very clear expectations and outcome in shorter intervals.
Yeah.
And the final word I would say is don't fix what doesn't need fixing.
Yes, exactly.
So we don't need to go and pick up everything and let's automate everything. No, we don't need to automate everything.
Exactly.
Thank you.
On so many, thank you. You've touched on so many points, Asma. on the job, on the jobs and cost, and the fact that there needs to be a goal before we automate anything. We need to understand what it is it going to achieve. I'm going to take those great points to Eddie. Welcome again, Eddie. We've talked about this specific point. You at GBM talk a lot about how businesses, when they think about automating or RPA programming, should they or should they not, this question always comes up, change their business frameworks, applications, or existing cycles to get into this digital challenge?
Thank you, Jesse, and thank you for all the esteemed guests. The answer is simply yes and no. In short, we don't need major investments and major reformation of the framework or the tools and the processes that are available there. We simply need to take it from the standpoint of, if I want to automate, I want to start thinking of automation first from a process perspective and start simplifying what's existing, be it sometimes eliminating part of the process, sometimes hiding certain steps, or maybe we think of converting, or maybe, let me say, the process itself needs to be looked at from an automation perspective. Obviously, what Asma and Codine and Yuan were saying, obviously the automation needs to address the business needs. And as Codine was saying, customer experience, definitely automation is there to improve customer experience and customer service. And obviously what Asma and Yuan were saying, reducing headcounts and cost saving is along the way. It's part of the game. Having said that, going back to the question, once we start simplifying those processes, we need to select the right tools in place, and the right tools in the strength and characteristics of the tool itself, and mapping those business needs and mapping those elements of the process to those tools. This is how we start applying RPA. So it doesn't require major reformation of the framework, but it requires some work on the processes for sure.
Okay, fair enough. That answers that famous question that's always asked about this topic. I'm going to, Saikat, I'm coming to you now with everything that we have heard about the need and the influence of RPA and how it could make things easier for both customers and businesses. From what you've heard now, what do you think, how do you think not only that banks can benefit, but also what are the necessary tools that are effective for businesses to use and adopt as they prepare for RPA solutions?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, everybody. So wonderful views. I fully agree with the approach of purpose and going with the customer journey approach. Another very important point or takeaway from what esteemed colleagues have mentioned, right, is that there are different types of customers or persona. The millennials are going to go for more, automated, digitized journey, whereas we still have people who will need kind of more paper-based journeys, right? So that's what brings to
call them the classic.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why it's important to look at automation from a front office, middle office, back office a little bit differently, because front office will have a multi-channel approach. Middle and back office, unless necessary, can have a digitized one kind of, STP or no operations kind of an approach, right? The reason I say that is because the threat is coming from the neobanks and the banks and the fintechs like Revolut, etc., Revolut, N26, etc., who are driving the cost-to-income ratio really down, which is why the traditional banks need to adapt, right? Now, in terms of the benefits, see, there are both top line and bottom line benefits. And I think Asma mentioned a few of those. It's quite understood. I think the benefits, though, before I get to the benefits, I want to also mention that the technology has moved beyond RPA. So we have to be very clear that it is not about just RPA that we're talking about. So it is RPA with workflows, natural language processing, API, microservices, then AI, machine learning, etc. Right? That's what can give a end-to-end.
Old news, right? That's what Asma was saying. RPA is old news. It's not even. It has passed already.
I mean, there are banks who haven't done that. Trust me. I mean, I interact with different kind of clients on a continuous basis. So the way I see it is, yes, the technology may have come earlier, but different banks in different countries have progressed in a different speed, but they still have access to the newer technologies now, so they can have a different approach. So when we look at automation today, we are really talking about what we call as hyper automation with the different tool sets, right? Now, in terms of the benefits, what I really want to highlight is a lot of our clients actually have seen, they try to focus more on the cost takeout. And I think what Asma was pointing out, that it is not just about cost takeout. So I want to take this opportunity to highlight the other areas, how it can benefit. So yes, cost optimization is one area, maybe easier to understand, which is why the business cases try to found on that. But then we are talking about paperless transactions. We are talking about revenue improvement because your customer process is seamless. It is with better quality, better speed, and you're able to launch new products at a faster rate because the infrastructure required to set it up can be put in faster because you're using automation technology. So that's a big top line benefit. Yeah. There are a few other areas, which is avoidance of cost of non-compliance. So banks, a lot of time, because the regulators come in with some decisions, start assembling a lot of people to get compliant or do something. Right now, we have seen some of our clients very intelligently use automation to solve that problem. Right, instead of hiring 100 people, they ended up automating with RPA and other technologies to cut that to 5 or 10 headcounts plus digitization, and also did it ahead of time, right? Then cost of training and attrition. That's also another aspect when we talk about business cases. And finally, another point is data, which is that when we have digitized process, we are talking about data that is available for analysis, dashboarding, decision-making. So yeah, I think all of these aspects are key, how banks can benefit. One other point that I just want to mention as a closure is on this point is, I think going forward, banks and financial institutions really should think about, for new products and new processes, think about hybrid operating model, which is a combination of human plus virtual, right? Instead of thinking the old way that we set it up with a human team with SOPs, etc., and then we move it to a virtual. I think once that comes inherently culturally to us, and of course all of us are adapting to that scenario, I think it will be a long and smooth journey of digitization and automation.
Great.
Yes.
So that ends this first round of questions we had regarding the benefits and the preps, let's say, and the goal of RPA and how being customer centric is the key. I'm going to go back to Codine. Now we move on to the next big bullet point, which is security, data security, sensitive data, important data that needs to stay in place. There's a lot to be said about RPA and sensitive information. How safe is it, is my question when it comes to security?
Well, I think the answer is it's as safe as you design it up front, because, and I'll explain a little bit more in details here. We talk about applications, right, that are replicating human tasks. So those repetitive human tasks, getting, for example, data from one system to another. First of all, as a first statement, let's put it like this: you need to have a proper governance in place to define basic rules whenever you start deploying these robots. So for example, one identity for each robot. It's a simple rule. The same credentials for, so one identity for one robot and one identity for one process. Change these credentials of the bots as frequently as possible, not to be hacked. Another basic rule, if you define a script, for example, you need to have security team in place to define some controls in that script. For example, I have a bot that needs to go in a database and extract some data over there. It should have, and then throw it in an email, for example. That piece of data is customer sensitive type of data. You shouldn't give the right to a bot to do writing in that that database. Only reading, of course, because it's just extracting something. So these are simple examples of actually how you can prevent things happening. Now, no matter how much security you put in place, let's say things can go wrong. What you do in that case? What I've seen enterprises doing across the world, you actually keep the logging of the bots in a separate system, and you give a very good access and visibility to the security team. Once you have something wrong happening, let's say a leak, then this team can go and check that log, and the whole history is there. You know exactly what happened. So fundamentally, when you are in a hurry and you want to deploy as many bots as possible and to show the ROI to your board and so on and so forth, sometimes the security part is not really your top priority. But as long as you start with a good governance and framework in place, and you define some critical roles, like for example, an RPA controller, okay, you have the developer, you have the controller, then things can go relatively smooth. So I would say if you have the minimum requirement in place, then security is not really an issue.
Perfect. I see Ewan nodding his head in approval. I think you may have a point or two to say when it comes to data security. So I'll give you the mic, and I'll add to it the issue of cost optimization. If you can possibly address that, how could that be optimized when it comes to service through software models?
Nice one, Jesse. Yeah, I think if you're doing it right, cost optimization comes anyway, right? If you're doing it right, I think. Looking at data security, I'm nodding aware there, listening to Codeine and saying, yeah, I totally agree with you. If I take a slightly different approach here, Jesse, from customer security or data security, one of the major benefits of automating systems, processes, application processes, and so on, or standardizing, is that you move away from bits of paper. Right, you move away from bits of paper that are being stamped, and that you can easily change a 1 to a 7 or add a 0. And where you have human fallibility, right? And you have the piece of paper being dropped on the floor by mistake. Someone climbs into their car and realizes a bit of paper. A customer record is there in their briefcase. That kind of situation. When you've automated this stuff. When the only way to apply for a loan is either through the phone, the call center, or in branch, and when that process is, identify yourself, okay, right, have that scanned, check with the government institution, confirmed, next, then do a lookup to see who is this individual, but you're doing that real time, then check with compliance. And so that I think gives a lot of comfort to the institution. And to the regulator, but also I would hope to the customer, in that their data is being processed and managed in a very controlled fashion. So I think that's a real benefit of automation. There is making sure that there isn't the opportunity, either deliberately or by mistake, to get things wrong. Now, you're only as good as the processes and the systems that you design. But I think if you then look at implementing a really nice smooth process, one would hope that logically the cost, the efficiencies come.
Eddie, if we move on from the topic of cost optimization, which we have discussed, and maybe we all agree on the goals, how does automation integrate AI and machine learning, and how will it look in the future?
Simply, we're starting in the beginning with simple tasks, and that's part of the RPA. Along the way, you want to automate even more. Some processes are becoming more and more complex, and you need assistance. Where today we don't see possible automation for certain processes in full, this is where AI and machine learning come in place to assist us and automate the automation. So let's not forget that the part of the automation that is the RPA, these are part of the core of automation. The natural language processing, we have the AI and machine learning. So situations, I want to go back to one point that Asma mentioned, and I think it was tackled by Saikat, is the existence of RPA throughout, let me say, the past few years. I'm sure there are so many implemented RPAs, but at the same time, RPAs should not be implemented in silos. So within the organization, if it's not implemented in a thoroughly disciplined and a structured way, it will not accumulate the benefits for the organization. And it becomes more and more dangerous. And I think what Codine and Ewan were trying to say is that the danger of costs and inefficiencies and maybe customer data and what the regulation for siloed RPA implementation is very dangerous. So we need to consolidate that under one effort as part of every process. This is where you start augmenting the benefits of RPA and automation. Adding to that, if a process is very complex to automate, once you add AI and simplify the process, and with the AI technologies, it becomes more and more automation. And the more RPA within the processes we have with AI, I think Saikat mentioned the word hyper-automation. This is where you start achieving hyper-automation within the organization. So this is where we're heading. I think this is where the roles of a human and for simple tasks are being eliminated more or less, more and more, but it's not going to be totally out unless we have a philosophy of putting them completely out. At the end, it's a business dictated benefits. So if we're putting the benefits and the business first, we design the journey. We start with RPA, then we start adding to it the regulations on top of it for sure, and then AI and machine learning to achieve the outcome that we desire.
Okay, so thank you for that. Since you mentioned Asma, I'm going to come back to you. You've mentioned cost effectiveness, but now I want to move with you to success factors. There must be some success factors that you can maybe pin down or advise businesses to have before they go through on this journey.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, there are many business cases with us in Oman, our bank, and I'm sure there are in other banks too, local or international. And I think my colleagues very well, highlighted that every institution is at a different phase right now of implementation, be it RPA or any other, automation solutions. I really love what Eddie mentioned here, automate the automation. I'm going to quote you on that one. Some of the critical success factors, which I would like to highlight, they're very simple. And to start with is know what you are automating. I'll start with where I stopped. Not everything needs to be automated. We need to look into the volumes. The low volume processes doesn't need to be touched. If it's happening once in a year, it's happening once in 5 months. Why would you take the whole cost and efforts of automating something which has that little volume and value? So it has to be, mapped to what is the value I'm creating here. And before even thinking, how am I going to put it in Robo or put it in any other automation platform, is the process working well? It has got 100 steps. Let's automate it. Why do we have 100 steps? We may not even need 100 steps. And I would a bit not agree with you, Saket, on, you should look at the automation as front, mid, and that, to be frank, I see at it as throughout, like a web in an organization. So in fact, if I have picked up a process, no matter where it sits between front, mid, and support, I don't like to refer support units as back offices. So if I pick up any one of them, then I should start with looking at where all it is linked, because there could be processes in silos sitting in different areas, which I can all get them together and connect it to that one process. And by one automation, I may get rid of 5 other processes. So it is the basics of understanding the process itself. Sometimes I'm a firm believer of 90% planning, and then your 10% time is given to perfect implementation and execution. So in automation, I believe that 90% planning is really important, because general human understanding is automation, everything will be solved. Even what I feel is going to be solved. Now, how is system going to even know what do you feel, unless you have put it on a paper in a requirement document that, well, I felt that when I automate this, my turnaround time is going to be 3 minutes from 3 hours. No, that feeling is great. Let that feeling be our aspiration, but let's put it down on a paper, okay, or on a system. We don't want to use papers on how we are going to go there. And then, RPA is just a tool, like many other tools. It will give us the best benefit if we have designed it well. But we should always remember the possible errors which could happen. So sometimes in a RPA specifically, you have automated 11 steps to happen. If there is any one error which happens in one of those 11 steps, which data coming in from any other, any particular system or application, then the whole chain can go wrong. So that needs to be kept in mind, that there should be certain governance, monitoring, and checking in place to ensure that the robo is working well and going through seamlessly and doing the expected transactions.
Yes, that makes sense. So I'm going to go to Sarkat, since you mentioned also the point about the process itself. Sarkat, I'd love your ideas about cost effectiveness, but most importantly about increasing productivity, which Asma also spoke about very briefly, and how can you merge those two, cost effectiveness and increasing productivity, to get to the goals or achieve the results?
So yeah, let me respond to that question. But firstly, let me respond to one point about that Asma mentioned, right? So actually, Asma, I'm totally with you about the end-to-end customer journeys approach, looking at a process from front to back. What I really meant was the approach of automation needs to be a little bit different between front versus middle and back. But we definitely want to look at processes end to end. And that's something I always tell to my clients. So that's one of the things I always say. Okay, so see, firstly, before I again would like to go back to the word purpose, which is very important. And we need to understand as a bank, what is the level of automation that is desirable for you? It is very important to understand that in view of competition that you're facing in the local market. And I can tell you, 5 years or 10 years down the line, there will be banks who would have automated a lot, like 80% automation or 70% automation, and then they start struggling, because then when things change, they don't have people to actually tweak things, right? So this balance is an individual strategy of a bank and needs to be very clearly thought out. In the same way, servicing and different models of where you place people, all of this are thought out, right? So what is the level? What is the degree? Now, in terms of what are the key success factors or the essential elements to make this successful? Firstly, start right with the business use case or the process in mind, right? That's the first thing. We should not start a program saying that I want to do an RPA program. Then then we are already gone down the wrong way. We should start saying that I want to achieve a certain efficiency across this business areas. Maybe it's credit, maybe it's onboarding, maybe it's this. And then let's think what are the right technologies to kind of smoothen this journey for the employees and the clients. So starting right, that is very important. And in that process, we reimagine the process in a digitization lens. Because the current set process was created possibly many years back, which is more from a different era altogether, right? Second is business case. There are two inputs or thoughts that I have. We should not try and do a business case process by process. Sometimes I've seen that becomes too time consuming for clients, and there are also some processes which may have low automation benefits, some may be very high. But what you really want is an overall average degree. So I am always a very strong proponent of doing a business unit based journey and planning on an annual or 2-year basis. Yeah. And obviously it was mentioned by others earlier, look at processes which are high volume, high frequency, where you can get good benefits, right? The third point I want to mention is having access to the hyper automation platform. Now, what this means is, before we embark on a digitization and automation journey, we should have already identified the different building blocks of the Lego puzzle, right? So it's like a Lego puzzle where there are different building blocks. And all of the hyper automation platforms which have started to come up now, they are already combining multiple of these things like RPA, AI machine learning, workflows, APIs. Then RPA itself, the RPA platforms have opened up access to digital exchanges and ecosystems, right? Using which you can quickly call a certain function to do a particular task. So we should have this identified, and that should be out of the way. And then we should take an automation center of excellence approach, which is by far I've seen gives the best value, because if different business units start doing this on themselves, then what happens is they will always incur more cost. But if you can have at least 2-3 different business units say that, okay, but the next 2-3 years, let us all put some funds and budget and let's go for it, then you can have shared resources across some of those skills which are not required 100%, but you can share, right? Plus, it's not just about resources. It's also about consistency, reusability of the code, which can be used for faster speed of implementation. So the method, right? And the last point I want to mention, which honestly is very much ignored within the industry today, is the follow through of change management. So when we are automating, we are talking with process, the operators, right? We're getting information. They get scared because they think that this is going to take out their jobs. But that part is totally neglected, and something has to happen about that, which is a proper change management approach to upfront say that why we are doing this and what happens, what are the reskills, what are the skills that you're going to learn based on this, what are the roles that this is going to create where you can participate and which will be better for you, right? So this is a very important, I would say the last point that I wanted to mention. If we follow these principles, then definitely we can scale. There's no reason not to. And it will be helpful for the shareholders and the banks.
I think it was a great session across this question. Actually, gave us all some space to express ourselves. I mean, there is a lot of food for thought here in terms of the success factors and so on. I want to summarize a little bit because there were so many amazing ideas spread it around, and the very beginning of my career in banking, I was a process improvement guy. I'm a certified Lean Six Sigma black belt, and I like very much to talk about the importance of having an architecture of the processes in your company. I mean, we are spending tremendously amount of time and paying attention to all the details when it comes, for example, to design our house, right? But when we talk about designing our companies and really structuring them around the customer, because this is one component of being customer centric, like how you structure all these departments and all these functions and all the silos that we are complaining about and so on. Because traditionally we formed hierarchies for command and control purposes. That was in the 19th century, but right now the command and control part is diluted, and it's where automation helps a lot, because you don't need human controls in each and everything. So one success factor is having a very good framework to actually visualize the architecture of your processes. And I would say here, among other vendors, I would say IBM is one example, without advertising, that IBM came long time back with a model for process architecture and with tools in this space. Then when it comes to this architecture, end-to-end processes, sub-processes within these big end-to-end processes, roles, responsibilities, are we having mostly manual tasks in these end-to-end processes? Are we having multiple systems across these processes and so on? Separately, how is the data? Is it readable? Is it structured? Do we have rule-based tasks or not? And these all things, once you are honestly and transparently assessing your current maturity, it gives you a perfect spotlight where to start from and what to focus on. This is in a simple, and change management for sure. People are the key here.
I want to ask a question to you, Codine, regarding change management, which Saikat had just mentioned. One of the challenges that C-level executives have is convincing board of directors with such changes, because there is a notion, it could be a misconcept, that it's expensive and it requires additional investments. What would you say to the C-levels who are attempting to convince the board?
We all know, especially in our industry, money is important. So all of us should have a bit of a double role here, all of us who are dealing with automation and improvement and so on. On one side, what I've heard so far, we need to be what Jack Welch used to say, chief meaning officers, to remove the clutter and to make the meaning very clear and the purpose for everyone. And separately, we need to be, to a certain extent, chief CFOs, okay? To speak the language of money. The research is very obvious here. Depending on the maturity, you can have in the first year an ROI from RPA anywhere between 30% up to 200, even 300%. That's from research, very straightforward. It's very easy to calculate because you know how much money you pay your staff. Okay, so we know how much. Sometimes I'm bringing this example whenever we have big long meetings with a bunch of senior people around the table. How much is a meeting costing us, right? And what is the outcome of that meeting in the end? So we know all the costs. We know the cost of the RPA development and maintenance. So the ROI is very simple to be calculated once you have the number of hours and how much time staff is spending on these manual activities. I would say sometimes you don't even need RPA. You can do some small automations. I had a recent example within my team, and somebody who has the skills managed to automate a couple of things that were before were making us spending on a daily basis a certain amount of time. So when you look at the end of the year how many hours you saved, then you have a very clear return on investment. The other part, which is probably harder to quantify, is the morale of the people. Once they got rid of these boring activities, and as Saikat mentioned, some of them might feel threatened. Oh, I was good in this, and what I'm doing now, because I'm having so much time. So reskill is one component here, but also it's about actually giving the person the freedom to come up, because now that person has more time to do more comprehensive work, more valuable work. But coming back to your question, this is a pretty simple. There are plenty of ROI templates. Again, it makes sense to look by default at manual activities that are taking at least 1 hour for a task or more. Sometimes there are cases. I had again recently an example in our team, somebody doing a manual work for something like 20 to 25 minutes, again with high volumes and very repetitive activity. We managed to comprise it in 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, again, even without utilizing RPA. The beauty of RPA is now, this is from, let's say, effort perspective, but the RPA technology itself, it's not expensive, right? I would say, from the top of my head, we have RPA technologies that can go to something like $20,000-$30,000 to implement a bot. Again, depending on the complexity, you have some maintenance cost, but it comes with something very important as well: low-code technology that enable you with an initial training, okay, done by some experts, to spread this skill. The most advanced companies nowadays, I was talking to some friends who are actually in charge with the RPA Center of Excellence in very large multinational organizations. And they are spreading the skills now across the departments. They are training people in each and every department, so everybody can do some low coding activities and do some bots and so on. But again, somebody centrally should have this big picture. So the return on investment is obvious. It's obvious and very quantifiable.
Okay.
So if I can add, I don't know, Jesse, if we're running out of time, but can I add a few things on this?
Yes, go ahead, briefly.
Okay, so just, I think the one question that you asked was about how you convince the board about the cost of change management and all of that, right? So see, one example that I always use is survival of the fittest, the famous kind of Charles Darwin, right? So the point is, we as micro ecosystems, as banks or individuals, we have to improve, and we have to get better, faster with what we are doing, how we are delivering service to our clients. And if we don't take that path, then obviously there will be competition that will challenge us, right? So I think that's an important argument to give to any senior management who has any resistance for this. And then obviously we follow through with the whole aspect of the low code enablement of the accountants, operators, etc., who can reskill themselves, reinvent themselves. And it actually applies to them as well on individual level. I mean, if you are willing to learn, if you are willing to put that extra effort, you become more important for the organization and do better for yourself. I think that's where it ends.
Perfect. I have the same question for Ewan and Asma. So I'm going to ask you the same question, if you can briefly tackle it, because it's very important and you all mentioned it briefly. How do you think, or how will the implementation of RPA actually bring more opportunities, which is how we're going to tackle this misconception that RPA is going to force people out of jobs. So that's for both of you, Ewan and
Asma, you go first, please.
Yeah, thank you. Being a lady, sometimes you get that opportunity. Thanks. Well, I think just to add a point on the ROI, which my colleagues were talking about, I think if we showcase the ROI or just the benefits one gets out of an investment, be it RPA or any other investment, it's easy to get approvals from the board, for the budgets required, because ultimately every institution is investing a certain amount in technology. So that's an ongoing investment which is happening. Now, how do I see foresee the opportunities coming out of the RPA implementation? See, I was reading a report which mentioned that in the last decade, there was $321 billion paid towards compliance operations.
Yeah.
Now, I think during our last 1 hour discussion, there was some mention about the cost of compliance.
Yes.
And the cost of cybersecurity. So sometimes things, if are not taken into consideration, the costs could be too huge an amount. So it's worth, investing in those technologies. So what is compliance operations? Compliance operations is all the data we insert through our different processes for the compliance reasons, be it the KYC, be it the tax authorities, be it the AML. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that at the time of customer onboarding, at the time of different transactions happening in client accounts. So some of the business cases which I have come across in international banks are around these processes, which should be aimed to be, automated through RPAs. The loan processing is something which can be looked into. The customer service and regular account updates, which is part of the KYCs. The automatic report generation. Whenever I think of reports and I think what Robo can do to cut down that fat of, repetitive steps to be taken by human, you get a staff, this was years back, but it's a very interesting thing I came across to. So set of people, what do you do? I'm an expert in Excel. Perfect. Can I see what are you doing? And what are they doing is just literally filtering and sorting and color coding and all. It's fun. I mean, I think a grade 4 student can do that in today's time. I mean, not to really belittle the people, but I felt bad that as a person, as a senior person, if we use our people for that sort of a thing. So we have better solutions to use to free them up. And maybe they end up doing coding. Maybe they end up doing far better things, far better thinking, strategizing, and innovating than really doing this. So automating report generation is something which can easily, an opportunity to go into RPA. Bulk entries. Now, being again from operations, that's a nightmare. Bulk entries. Once in a while we get those entries. Sometimes they're related to KYC. Sometimes they're related to month end, quarter end, year end. Maybe a CTO can understand the pain when they get a call at midnight that, I need to get this done before the month end, before the day end. And then we run.
No.
We literally beg them to get it done. So yeah.
He doesn't pick up. You pick up? He won't pick up.
No, I have to very honestly say that CTOs have always been my best friends, and they will continue to be my best friends forever and forever.
Great relationship. You have any?
We have to work hand in hand. The technology and operations, they are one. They're no more looked at two different things. So bulk entries. So that's sort of a pain area from an operations perspective, which can easily move into robos. And the general, account management and account closure. So there are a lot of business cases already out there. But like Saket mentioned, there can be a lot more done if one gives the required importance to the processes which need, high volume processes which can move to RPA. The benefits, just one thing which to highlight is sometimes it's not just the dollar value, it's also the processing time. And there are too many case studies which have come out that average 25 to 50% is the achievement you get in processing time, a reduction in processing time by moving to Robo. Mm-hmm. And I really love what was highlighted is the people, the mindset. It's sometimes about mindset. It's change of mindset. It's new way of doing things than the old way or the boring way of doing things.
Yes.
And to conclude in my closing statement, I would say that, it's not just about Robo. It's about having a journey, a digitalization journey with continuous automation, with continuous message, clear communication given out to people that what is in there for me. And it has to be at the heart of the institution's operating model and the strategy. So period. It's not a way, let's do the best things and feel good about it. No, it has to be there in the VNs, in the DNA, that this is there to be done consistently. Today we talk about this solution, and while we are having this 1 hour chat, I'm sure something else has been, innovated somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you. Ewan, briefly to you before I conclude with Eddie.
Right, then if I give a brief perspective here, if we take a step back, why are we doing this? Cost is cool, automating, making things faster. Really, we're doing this. We're talking about this whole topic because there is monumental change happening across the planet. Because the customer base, you just have to look at Omanis, right? They two phones. They got phones all over the place. There's apps and next generation fintech technologies are very, very readily being adopted in this region. I think the Omani population is one that is incredibly keen on digital technology, incredibly keen on just in time, get it done, make it happen from the phone. This is why we're talking about that. We're not talking about it to reduce cost. That's a benefit. We do need to reduce costs. But the major pressure for all institutions, all financial institutions, is there is someone at your heels right now, whether it's an incumbent bank, or in many cases, it's the new generation of fintech that don't have the 35, 40 year technology. They don't have to worry about that, right? They don't have to redesign a process. They just say, do you know what? It should go A, B, C. Yeah, build it. It's done, live, okay? And then the customers embrace it and love it, and that's an issue. So we're talking about these things because fundamentally, the financial institutions have to be responding to this disruption we see coming in country, regionally and then internationally. So this is why we're doing it. I think that's a key point to make.
Eddie, if you allow me briefly to end with you on the idea of the operation, and how banking operation in and itself is a tedious task. So could you tell us briefly, how do you manage the migration of critical and important IT infrastructure during such an automation process without interrupting business activities, day-to-day activities?
Thank you. Very, very, very important question. I think it's very valid to define the entire process of, let me say, the life cycle of such projects. So usually it starts with an aspiration from the bank, like the desired, let me say, business outcome. And that's part of it is the way they want to work. Is it really working for them? A new way of working to tackle those business changes that they aspire to. Some of them, they have a lack of engagement. So they want to increase engagement. Or some of them, they want to add additional services, additional portfolio, new businesses, and maybe a better operation. And they couple with it some potential outcome, like related to the revenue, related to the cost saving, related to maybe customer experience, customer services. Asma mentioned the word compliance. I think it's an extremely valid point as well here. Eliminating the errors and maybe the paperwork and so on. So they start looking at the business processes that they have currently, and if they want to enhance these processes, they want to eliminate part of it. They want to maybe convert some of it to become more relevant, and then they call partners like GBM and like IBM, and they come and bring in some tools that has financial capabilities, financial understanding, a certain structure and strength related to assisting them with this journey. And some of them is RPA, some of them is the artificial intelligence, as we mentioned. Some of them are, I think Ian mentioned the biometrics, maybe OCR for unstructured data, maybe NLP, maybe many more. So this is the journey from the bank side. When it comes to us, we need a clear understanding of the existing process and what they want to achieve. And as a partnership between the two organizations, hand in hand, we design the migration by taking those processes that have been re-engineered with automation first look. And then we develop them along with the bank to make sure there is the best outcome there. We test all the scenarios possible that could possibly within the bank or with customers. After designing and taking sure that we covered all the scenarios with security in mind, we take it to a system where we do the acceptance test, and we roll out with few branches. Some employees along the way needs to be enhanced from a capabilities and from a competency perspective. So the element of the human nature to have influencers within the bank to be the heroes of such new tools and such migration is essential. And once it is on board and those people, they see lots of benefits, I can assure you that the majority of the bank employees will need to embark on such a journey. So it becomes the ball starts rolling much faster than usual. So let's not forget that we need to tackle all 4 elements of any change within the organization. We need to tackle the processes. We need to tackle the tools and the right tools and the right design for processes. We need to tackle the people and the competency and the readiness to adopt such technologies. And we need to have the culture readiness within the organization to take this forward, be it influencers, be it informal powers, be in the values and the benefits of the organization. This should be either communicated top down or within the organization with influencers bottom up. I think this summarizes the entire journey. And we've seen within Oman major successes in this area if it's designed very well, and you see a partnership between the organization is working as one team. And I think at the end, the bank needs to achieve certain outcomes, certain business value and business benefits. And we are here for that. The bank is here for that. So we shouldn't miss any elements of the entire process.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eddie. We've had such great insights from all of you today. I wouldn't even be able to summarize, but I just took quick key points. Most of you agreed on the speed and the reliability of RPA tools if the customer needs and experience were centric to any RPA adoption, and if it has a very clear goal that the team or the business is trying to achieve in the banking sector. You all agree that RPA is not necessarily about eliminating jobs. On the contrary, it might actually create new jobs and new horizons for those existing ones. Also, most of you agreed that RPA is not necessarily requiring major investments and funds as previously believed. And a lot of you spoke about cost optimization, saving time, but most importantly, changing the mindset before we adopt any automation tool. I'd like to thank all of you for taking part in this really insightful panel about banking and automation. Thank you so much. This panel, this topic was brought forward to you by Forbes Middle East in partnership with GBM Oman. Good luck to everyone. I'm sure we'll see you in the next series.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.